A proper good morning to everybody. Sorry, I know you've all been joining. Thanks for joining on time. We've got quite a bit to get through today, so I'm hoping we'll get an opportunity to talk to a very large panel amongst us. If at all possible, if you want to leave yourselves on mute. I know quite often on these lunchtime sessions, people are listening with things going on in the background when you're in the office, etc. So that'd be really, really helpful. And there will be an opportunity for some questions throughout. There's a little bit of Menti polling as well. But do feel free to pop any questions that you might have in the chat so that we can make sure we can get to them at the end as well. But a proper good morning from me. I'm Sue. I'm the head of attraction here at Amberjack, and we're pleased to bring you a panel event today, having a look at student engagement through events this autumn. Our panel is vast and plentiful, as you can see on the screen here, and I'll let introduce themselves properly when we go to them throughout the session. But we're joined by Hester Watson from Bright Network, who is responsible for the event planning over there and will be able to talk to us about some of the opportunities that there are to participate with students face-to-face and virtually through some of their event networks. Jessica Bryant joins us from King's College London, Lucy Palmer from the University of Leeds, and Victoria Houston from the University of Bath. We've got some good university representation today. And we're also delightfully joined by two students who are going to give us their view on student engagement on campus. Jensen Bale at the University of Leicester and Ronke Ajisola from the University of Sheffield as well. And last but certainly by no means least, Emma Cooksley, our Early Careers People Manager at Morrisons, will be giving a little bit of a view and insight from an employer perspective. We wanted to run this session today to have a look at the changing world of student engagement on campus. I think pre-pandemic, things were a little bit different. We've seen some changes coming out of the pandemic, but we've even seen changes this year on last year. And we wanted to discuss that while it was all still quite fresh in everybody's mind. I'm quite certain most people here have been attending events quite heavily over the last 6 to 8 weeks, quite an intense period for most, but we'll talk about what you've experienced and your insights and opportunities, and as I say, that view from both students, employers, and from the University Career Services as well. We're going to kick off with a little bit of market insights, headlines from the ISE recent report. Then we'll get into the panel discussions with everybody, and hopefully at the end we'll have some key takeaways for you, which will be available along with the recording if you'd like to take a look. And as I mentioned, there will be an opportunity to do a little bit of Menti voting along the way to give us a bit of an insight, which I think we'll get started with now with our first question, if that's okay. I'm not sure how many of you will have used Menti before. It's very, very simple. You just go to menti.com and there's a code there on the top of the screen that Jasmine is sharing, which will ask you this question. We're just setting the scene in terms of tell us one standout activity for student engagement that you've carried out successfully this autumn. We really want to have a look and see if there is a range of activities that people have participated in and see what is working for everybody this year. We've got our own experience here at Amberjack. We run for our clients probably in the region of about 80 to 100 events over the autumn period. But it's good to see what everybody else is experiencing, good practice, best engagement from students, what's been really very interesting and helpful for you all. So I'll leave this up just for a moment, let everybody continue to add some responses. Somebody's been very excitable there with 5 days of consecutive fairs. That's quite heavy on the workload, I'm sure, for the careers team. It does seem to be early engagement seems to be very popular around the careers fairs, which is probably news to the ears of our university panel members that are joining us today. We'll leave that for a moment more. Did also do a poll online, actually, on LinkedIn. So I think when we put these results together, we'll give you a little bit of feedback and participation information to see how everybody was getting on. Some quite interesting things coming through now as well. great to see such a variety of things. If the Menti code will stay up, so it is 4497058. But Jazz, if we want to go on to the next slide, we'll have a quick look at the ISC insights while that's pulling up. And then we can have a look at that as we go through the discussions. So ISC released their student reports very recently, and we pulled out a couple of key market insights just for the employers amongst us that are interested to see what's going on in the student market. This is something that we've seen on a fairly regular basis. So we have seen student hiring has increased 16%. And it's expected to continue over this season as well, which against the economic growth in the UK is a very encouraging state to be in. Grad applications are definitely up, certainly something that we're seeing, and hopefully the employers on the session today will be experiencing that as well. There's a significant shift to skills-based hiring, basing decisions on potential rather than past experience. And this is something we're seeing across a lot of our clients, looking at widening the participation amongst their student intakes. But we do continue to see bigger shortages in terms of applications, particularly around, as is the usual, STEM opportunities, IT and digital, engineering, accounting, and legal, of course. One of the challenges with high applications is that students are applying to multiple schemes. So we are anticipating as a business here that engagement will be particularly important to make sure that we're preventing high renege rates, which I'm sure the season before last, many of you suffered from. Not so bad last year, but with the high increase in applications, we do expect that to be something that will come to the fore. Of course, we're seeing ED&I as one of the biggest challenges, and one of the things that we get asked for. Most female and disabled candidates are less likely to succeed when you compare the percentage of students actually going to university versus the percentage hired. And I was explaining to somebody just yesterday, in the 13 years that I've been doing this and working in this industry, we still continue to get asked for more females in STEM. So I know this is high on the agenda for many, many people. But there is a reduction in people asking for minimum requirements in terms of 2-1s, or perhaps adding UCAS points to requirements as well. So less than half are actually requiring a 2-1 degree now from the ISC membership base that participated in the survey. Our favourite one and topic of discussion at the moment, AI growing in use. 30% of employers are using it to improve their hiring. Significant increase on 9% last year, and employers are expecting to hire more grads due to their advancements in automation, perhaps contrary to people's expectation that AI is diminishing the opportunity in the employer market. So increasing the amount of diverse applications is something that we really want to have a look at today in terms of student engagement at university and how we do some targeting. So I think we'll start to get into the panel and ask a few questions of our team. We're going to kick off, if I may, with Emma Cooksley from Morrisons and have a look at a few things from an employer's perspective, particularly having a look at the way in which Morrisons do some of the planning and what their considerations are as they put that schedule together for the day. Morning, Emma.
Morning.
Good to see you. I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about Morrisons and your approach to university events and engagement with students.
Okay, so as with any employer out there, you know, there is a balance to what activities we would get involved with across that very short recruitment season. Each year that we recruit. That balance is built on a strategy. It has to have some science behind it. It's not just a guessing game for us. So we would look at what previously we've done in previous years, where successful candidates have come from, what sort of universities they've come from. I suppose that tricky for us, we are spread across the whole of the country, but we do have some very niche areas that we would want to recruit in. So the South, predominantly for us is a more difficult area to recruit from into our retail schemes. So we would decide along with Sue and the team in Amberjack what that recruitment strategy looked like. From a point of view of what involvement we would have with the university, we then add in the complexity of not only where we've seen successes from before, but where there is a strong niche within certain degree disciplines we might be looking for. So where would we reach out to for great universities around perhaps data science or around finance and accounting? And then there's the big thing of cost. So there is a big balance in what we do around cost and paid eventing, as opposed to eventing that we can perhaps still reach the audience that we want to get to, but without paying sometimes a big fee for being front facing in a careers event, in a fair event. Does that help, Sue?
Always, especially the mention of Amberjack in that mix as well. Thank you very much. But how do you choose the type of events that work for you? What are your considerations? I think as a business, you're a small team. What's important to you when you get into the planning?
So the actual events, again, we would want to have a variety. So if we're looking at a niche university for something as specific as, say, finance and accounting, then perhaps career eventing at a fair isn't what we would want to do. We would want to maybe be involved, maybe more face-to-face in some guest lecture pieces directly in front of the students that are those that we're wanting to attract. So I think it needs to be varied for us. I don't think that we can, with all honesty, visit a university event at a careers fair, have some really great conversations with students, but then it is in the lap of the gods as to whether we see that come through to an application and then beyond that into a process that creates in that actual offer. And that can be disappointing for us, particularly if we've spent money on an event that's a face-to-face. But we do have to attend those events to get that bigger market and also that footfall of young students coming past to be able to have that opportunity to engage. So that there too has to be a mix of both for us. And in that planning, we most definitely use our current graduates in going out and attracting at those events. So we would send people that are experiencing our schemes or have experienced our schemes so that they can really sell the virtues of what it is that somebody will join us to do for the 2 years on that particular graduate scheme. So if we are doing an event that is for retail, we will have retail people that are there that can tell it warts and all and build that expectation and really sell their stories of success and what that has looked like. So most definitely our current people are the sellers of our schemes out there in the big wide world of students.
And I think that answers my question. I was going to ask about how you were student-led in terms of your content and what you were discussing with students. And is that feedback that you get from your volunteers that is where the questions lead them when they're talking with students? They want to know genuine insights into the role, etc.
Yes, most definitely. Yes, there's always those questions as to, what can you tell us about the assessment process? That's always there. But realistically, there is a whole host of information on the internet that can be gained. We constantly view some of those sites to see what's out there for our materials that we assess with. But I think that the majority of concerns, questions, information that students want is around what does it really feel like to work in that organisation? What does it feel like to be on those schemes? What is the potential? And what does that look like at the end of a scheme? What sorts of jobs are there? Where do they end up working? Those are the really important things that we find that a lot of our graduates come back and say, everybody wanted to know.
And do you discuss that with them in the prepping of volunteers? Do you discuss about bringing their true selves to the event to make sure that they are giving that? You mentioned warts and all. Is that quite an open area of the business that you do in the preparation with volunteers to make sure they're bringing themselves to the events?
Yes, everybody that goes to attend an event for us, whether that be virtual or face-to-face, goes through a coaching call with one of my team. that will talk about what that event is, not just the logistics and the expectations of what they're going to do, but also around be authentic. There is nothing better than authenticity. Of course, we're picking, not picking, but those people that volunteer are those people that really want to engage with students. Not everybody has got the time, not everybody has got the capacity. There is a core group of people within each of our schemes that be the first to put their hands up and go. So we're not sending inexperienced people to event, we are sending people that can really articulate not just their scheme. There's 9 different graduate schemes within Morrisons, and being able to articulate each one of those, or to actually signpost someone as to where they can find out some more information, is really important to us. We also share a Google Drive with them that's got all of that experience, the frequently asked questions, the slide decks that can help guide. So, they have an ability to be able to research and look at loads of things and ask questions before they head out there into the world of university or virtual event.
Perfect. Sounds like they're very well prepared, which actually leads me on really nicely to ask some questions of our students, Ronke and Jensen, around what student expectations are from events. We hear authenticity and true insights, things that you can't see on the internet, that you will only get in talking to people. Ronke, is that something that you've experienced in terms of going to events, the sort of questions that you might ask and tackle when you go?
Absolutely. Whenever I go for events, I always try to find someone who recently just started at the company. Maybe.
Oh, I think we may have lost Ronke. I thought it was me for a minute, but is that the case for everybody? You get the pleasure then, Jensen. We're going to switch over to you just while we find Ronke again. I think she was having some connection issues earlier. But what are your expectations when you obviously attend events from employers? What are you looking for?
So for careers fairs, I only attend the ones on our business campus now, as the big general ones. I find all the information that's there really you can get off the internet. But Emma was right. The questions that I'm asking are, what is it like to work there? What's like if you have to move somewhere else? What's like the social life like? How can I is it easy to make friends? And ultimately, what are you going to end up doing after the scheme is over? Those are the main questions that I'm always asking. Stuff that you can't find on the internet, really.
We were discussing with somebody the other day, they were asking around AI and the use of that, and questions around whether you can use AI in your application, what hybrid working opportunities there are. So there are some more tricky questions that were perhaps, employers are sometimes catching up with in terms of what the market is looking for. Do you feel quite comfortable approaching employers at careers fairs to ask things that isn't easily accessible on the internet, some more personal questions about your circumstances, etc.?
Personally, yeah, I have no problem approaching people, but that must be a personal thing. I never have had a problem with asking questions like that. I can't really speak for everyone on that one.
And Ronke, I see you're back with us. Thank you for persevering with the technical issues. But is there anything you wouldn't be afraid to go and ask of employers? What do you want to ask them when you're there, and what do you hope to learn from them?
I hope to learn about the culture at the company, because I think that's the one thing that you can't get by researching online, and you actually have to speak to the people who work there. Some things can go unsaid. I can just sit and observe what's happening within the company. I like to go for insight days and open days, and I can tell a lot about whether I would fit into the culture there just by being in that space, which is why I tend to be in office events. But in terms of questions, there's really nothing that I can't ask. Yeah.
Another person brave to go and ask everything that they need to know, which is great to hear. And I think it speaks to that authenticity and getting that insight. I can see already some questions, which I think are relevant at this stage and reflect some of what you're discussing. But Jensen, perhaps you mentioned that you only attend you tend to stop attending the main careers fairs and focus on business related events. Do you prefer singling out those opportunities, or why is that?
I just found the information is way more relevant to me. Personally, as I'm studying like accounting and finance, so the people there, when I ask the questions, they've either done similar schemes that I'm looking for or on them at the moment, and they have all the answers. Whereas on the main schemes, just not as relevant information for me. And I'm sure like other campuses have got their own separate careers fairs that people would have preferred to go to as well.
And Ronke, would you prefer to speak with perhaps more seasoned individuals in the business who've been there for a long time, or would you prefer to speak a little bit more with students and alumni who are a little bit closer to the schemes and the reality of your own situation?
I like a mix of both. So in the open days that I've attended, we've had people who just started their career journey, and then we've had partners at the firm. And so I could ask both different sets of questions and, see what my life would look like when I start and see what my life could look like 10 years or 15 years into being with the business.
So a nice range for you. And the inevitable question, we will get some of these questions a little bit later, but I see the one that I think everybody really wants to know as well, probably from you both, is virtual versus face-to-face. Do you have a preference? And is there a reason for that preference?
Definitely face-to-face.
Okay. And why is that? I think we've lost Ronke again. Jensen, how about you?
I definitely prefer face-to-face as well. It's just way easier to ask any questions that you have. They're right there in front of you, rather than having to like put something in the chat and then it risks getting lost down with all the other questions. It just doesn't feel as like relevant as well.
So the physical or advantage of taking a virtual event is not something that overrides your desire to actually speak with somebody in person and feel like a slightly more personal connection is being made.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I said, also it's just any questions you have, they're going to get answered, whereas they don't tend to. In my experience, with the online ones.
Feels a little bit more of a commodity, more volume, less focus. Okay. Hopefully Ronke will join us. We've got some questions, I think, for the students a little bit later on, but I can see that everybody employer-wise is firing away questions ready for you a bit later. So we'll try and put those into an order and come back to you. But I was going to give an opportunity to have a chat with not only our universities that are joining us, but also Bright Network as well, to have a look at how the landscape of events on offer are changing. I see that a lot of the initial feedback on our Menti poll there was around careers fairs being highly popular, and then a few other interesting alternatives slipped into the mix. So it'd be really interesting to discuss some of those opportunities. So I was going to go to Lucy from Leeds first and talk about perhaps what your most popular events are in the autumn and what you would encourage employers to think about attending.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as we saw from the Menti, fairs are still a massive thing, both for employer uptake and student numbers. We run a couple of big fairs, so a kind of general fair and a STEM fair, and both of them, we get 100 employers at each, we get about 1,500 students. So for the volume of interactions, that's been really successful. But we've also run various other events. We've done themed weeks around parts of the application. So we'll have a week on CV skills, bringing in both employers, external employers, and also our own kind of careers advisors to give advice on that. Interviews week, assessment centre week, that kind of thing. And one particular event that springs to mind that went really well, we did a mock assessment centre. So an employer came in, we had 20 students attend, and they ran through a group exercise like they would in the real thing, and that worked super well because a lot of the students hadn't done it before, so it gave them really tangible practical experience. But also they were the kind of students that would then go on to apply for this particular company. They were all kind of from the right course, and they'd come because they were interested in that company as well. So hopefully it will end up having a good return on investment for the company as well.
Do you find that skills events have changed in any way, or are we all still offering the CV workshops, mock assessment centres, how to perform on a telephone interview? Have we started to bring anything new to your schedules in terms of thoughts and ideas?
In terms of semester one, we do kind of tend to stick to the basics because, you know, it's such a busy time of year. People just need to get their applications in for a lot of the grad schemes. And, you know, students still need to know how to do a CV and all of that stuff. We are now putting a bit more emphasis on, we're doing a lot more in person, obviously, and we're putting a bit more emphasis on confidence, I guess, and professionalism. After COVID, I think a lot of people, having been stuck behind a screen for such a long time, perhaps need a little bit more extra of that in-person practice for when they enter the world of work. So a little bit. And then in semester two, we kind of tend to do the slightly more different things. So it's a bit more, I guess, of a reflective period in like, what do you actually want to be doing for work? Things like we put a bit more emphasis on sectors that were maybe underrepresented at fairs, so creative arts and things like that. And it's a bit more like, what kind of work do you really want to be doing? Whereas semester one, we tend to stick with the classics, like the big fairs and the CV workshops and stuff.
And interestingly, I think you mentioned quite a few soft skills there that is coming to pass in terms of people's desire to upskill. And I think that's something we'll go back to Jensen and Ronke about a little bit later, some of the things that we are seeing in terms of feedback, which again leads me on quite well to ask Hester a question from Bright Network, because of course they do an annual report in terms of what students want, and there's a big drive for more skills-based opportunities and connections with employers. But Bright Network offer a huge range of events, a very specific schedule, so from the very big festival in September right through to some more bespoke and targeted events. Why is it that Bright Network are offering such a range, and what is popular, and how should employers plan to participate?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we do have a range of events. So Base Festival kind of attracts about 4,000 students, and it was our biggest festival ever this year, both for virtual and in-person attendees. And then we also have our other flagships, which kind of range from around 100 to 250 students, or potentially 300 as well, now that they're kind of growing. And then bespoke events, which we have done ones for as few as 10 students, but tend to be around the kind of 25 to 30 attendance mark. But really we do the range that we do to serve the different needs of both students and employers. So when it comes to the needs of students, we have different sector specific events, we have like skill building focused events, and we have events that allow the members to connect to people with a similar background to them. So for example, like we have Future Lawyers, which is like specifically a law event and which is quite targeted towards penultimate year law students, or we have like more skill building focused events, which is breaking barriers. And then in terms of like connecting people with a similar background to you, like we've got Black Heritage Future Leaders, where they can, where the students, like Black Heritage students, can meet Black Heritage kind of business leaders and graduates to kind of understand their perspective of the workplace and their experience at different employers. But then in terms of serving the different needs of employers as well, like we kind of are asking the questions of like, do they need to meet students from specific academic backgrounds? Like, for example, for some of our bespokes, like the students need to have studied maths at A level, for example. Or do they want to meet students that are already keen on like a specific sector and they kind of want to see like more like reliable applicants, like because they already know that they're interested in that sector, for example. And we kind of run them in a hybrid or a virtual format to kind of keep them as inclusive as possible for students around the country. All of our events have been pretty popular this year in terms of how far in advance employers have demonstrated interest and kind of signed on to attend. But from both kind of a student and an employer perspective, like Women in STEM, as you kind of mentioned at the start, Sue, is really popular at the moment. And kind of female students tend to be pretty engaged as well. So our Women in Leadership was the biggest one that we've done so far, after kind of 5 or 6 years of running it. Equally Festival as well. So there is kind of a big appetite from students at the moment, and because of the appetite from students, there's more appetite from employers, I suppose, because they know that the attendance rate is going to be high and they're going to be able to meet high quality students. So in terms of how kind of far in advance employers should be planning, like for reference, I suppose, like we've already filled quite a lot of spots on our spring events, which happen in February and March, and they'd already been filled in autumn. So it's kind of at least a season, if not a year, ahead of time.
We spoke the other day about the difference between careers fairs and multi-employer events and the slightly smaller, more bespoke targeting events. And Victoria, I think we discussed this in terms of how you were getting employers to engage with you and the sort of levels of activity. There is a bit of a shift, I think, towards people feeling that they have to narrow down for the events. But that changes obviously expectation in terms of 800 people at a careers fair event and a hugely wide audience to a much smaller, as Hester mentions, in some of the Bright Network events, to under 200 people in attendance and a lot more targeted. But from your point of view at Bath, how are you finding employers are engaging with you when it comes to events? How early are they planning? Are you struggling to get engagement with them? What is the impact of that for your students?
Thanks, Susanna. Yeah, so Bath has definitely returned quite heavily to fairs again. We are pretty much now back to what we would call the pre-pandemic levels. So we have a slower uptake and a sort of booking highs and booking lows. So when we release, we get a little flurry of activity. There'll be a bit of a lull if it's over the summer because we release quite early at Bath. And then it's dribs and drabs, and then there's pinch points again when we're getting closer to September, October. But fairs have definitely been the biggest interest for us this autumn, and not so much on some of the other events that we've traditionally still offer. So I think it's possibly something to do with a change in some of the rolling recruitment windows opening, and the finance industry seems to have been hit more so than some other industries. And obviously we are predominantly STEM at Bath. And then depends also on how big the employer is. Some of the internationals still book, but they don't necessarily book early. They still looking, I think, at what their target universities are. And then we've had quite, a lot that would book late, historically still book late. So I think some of it is culture, some of it is just what's happened since going back to pandemic. But fairs definitely work really well for us. So this year we did the 5 consecutive days, and that was a first for us to then put them into some sort of theme as well. So we've normally done 2 days where we've put an awful lot of employers in with an all disciplines day and then a STEM focus. But this year we took off faculties and tried to focus the days around that. And that worked really well for us. There were still a few big employers which hire from an awful lot across the campus and disciplines, and they were having to choose which day fits them better. But they still wanted to come and they still had a really good response. So consequently, we are doing the same semester 2 moving forward. We're going to have another fair in February, and then we'll have our final fair of the year in April. So generally speaking, we still fill them. It's just that they might be a little bit slower. Some of the locals and the SMEs or the regional employers will respond later when they know that they've generally got some money to spend, and they've got a team that they can put out to go and do a couple of fairs, whereas obviously the bigger employers have got teams across the country, and they can plan it a bit different that way. Some of the employers as well have certain sectors. Us being a big STEM university, there have been some other factors affecting people attending fairs across universities across this year. So we've seen that, I think, more predominantly for the first time this year, is that there's other factors that have affected them eventually getting here on the day, having booked.
Okay. And I think you mentioned their cost, and it was something that came up in Emma's mention at the beginning around the cost considerations. But actually, this is probably a trifecta question for Victoria, Lucy, and Jessica. And I'll start with you, Victoria, if I may. In terms of a cost base, I think I know that you've worked at Bath for some time, but is that mainly because I've been doing this for some time? So, but has your cost for careers fairs and participation changed much? And you do still charge for the majority of events to some degree, is that correct?
Yeah, so I think all the employers probably have some system about opportunity or jobs advertising, and that changes depending, I think, on what system you're using. But yeah, we do charge for majority of our events, and we have actually come down in price for the fairs over the years. So
okay,
a lot of that I think is response to pandemic and employee behaviour, and trying to get people back with us, and understanding that if we don't respond in some format about the realities of budgets and constraints and the hiring that people still have to do, but what that costs them internally, then you're not going to get people back on campus. So at the moment, we're trying a middle ground without damaging the reputation of Bath.
And it is challenging because, of course, that is one cost factor. There is many more in terms of equipment, people out of the business, and various other things. But Lucy, what's the lead sort of approach in terms of financing fairs and what the expected contribution is from employers, etc.?
Yeah, so we do charge for fairs. Similar to Victoria, we used to charge pre-pandemic. We charged a lot more than we do now. I think, again, because of employer expectations, during the pandemic, we did virtual fairs, which were free. So to go from free right back to what we were charging before was a bit tricky. So we're kind of in the middle now. But we don't charge for other events. So we don't charge an employer to come on an employer panel or to do a skill session.
I think that's relatively normal. But actually, Jessica, that leads me on nicely probably to start asking you a few questions around King's College as well, because I think you have a slightly different approach to some of the event fairs and costings for sure.
Yeah, so we do still charge for our main career fairs that we do once a year, but majority of the other events, when we're more so working with an employer and inviting them, those spaces are free. We do, however, charge whenever an employer does want to come on campus and do just promotional tabling, or they just want to promote that they're recruiting at the moment. So we do charge that at like at a minimum. But for the most part, when we are looking to have a great relationship with employers, we don't necessarily like extend them to pay anything. It's just kind of like building on that partnership of what they're supplying to the students is beneficial enough for us to work with them.
And I think across the board, in terms of skills workshops and things like that, I think for all of you, there is little or minimal charge for those sort of opportunities. And actually, given that's what students are asking for, that's quite an interesting approach and balance that can be reached in terms of the type of materials that employers could be bringing. So, Jessica, at King's College, how are you guys responding to the needs of students and what students are telling you that they want from events?
So I would say post COVID and the pandemic, King's has been allowed to kind of do a lot of variety of formatting to both benefit the student and the employer. So for instance, we do still throughout the year offer hybrid format. So we do in-person events. The in-person events are more lean towards networking. So providing students a space to speak directly to employers and make those personable connections. But then on the other hand, knowing that there could be some cohorts of students who are low engaged, who may not feel as confident, and providing them a space virtually to still get some great information and feel impacted by what we can offer for them as well. well. So it's very much a balance, and it's exciting because we get to test out different ways. Like we do our panel events virtually, which used to be in person before the pandemic. We still continue to run smaller spaces for networking, which always seems like a success when it's done in person versus virtual. But then we also have seen that when an employer runs a masterclass or a skill workshop, it could go either way, in person or virtual. And that gives me the opportunity, working with employers, to be flexible with what they prefer, if they feel benefit that their content would be more received virtually or in person.
And I think the Career Service at King's College is organised in a way to work with sectors. So you have a specific sector that you work with. What sort of alternative events to your main careers fairs are you finding? And perhaps share with the attendees here today what your sectors are that you do tackle.
So I work and support business, finance, and consulting sector. One of the biggest things of working with that sector is not just simply aligning them with the business and finance students, but giving them a space to welcome students from all different disciplinaries. They are always constantly saying that they don't care to reach directly to finance students. They want a variety. So it's about creating ways that we can invite those different cohorts and making like an intersection exchange of students finding out what they can get involved in. Like for instance, we had PwC on campus last month, and PwC worked with us to literally bring one person from all of 15 of their departments on campus. So that's ops, law, audit, tax, all those different ways that you can work with PwC that students may not be aware of. And just because they might be studying a different particular disciplinary, they may feel like, oh, there's nothing for me here. So we're trying to continue to expand on that engagement space, giving students the upper hand to say that despite what you're studying, you can still come and be welcome in the business and finance consulting spaces.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Jessica. Jasmine, I'm going to ask if you're able to share the results of the Menticide in terms of what people found to be most successful. And apologies, I don't think I told you that's what I was going to ask you to do, but I think that if you're able to share it, that leads us quite nicely into my questions really of Jensen and Ronke in terms of the results that are on here. So these are some of the areas that people felt were standout activities for student engagement over this past sort of 6-8 weeks of autumn fair semesters events. But are there any opportunities in there that you didn't know were available that perhaps interest and excite you to look at different ways of participating and meeting with employers? So things like, have you been to speed networking events, and therefore is that something that you'd recommend, or it'd be something you'd be interested in trying if you haven't? Ronke, perhaps I'll start with you.
Just gonna make sure everyone can hear me.
Yes, all good.
Yes, okay. I hope that stays connected. I've never been to an employer speed networking event, but I'm not sure how effective it would be. I'm not sure how it would run. I don't know if I would have enough time to get to know each company, but it sounds interesting. I have been to mock assessment centers, and I found that extremely, extremely good. Every mock assessment center I've been to, I've been determined that I want to work with this company, just because they've made that extra effort of showing me, how their assessment process goes. I think I said previously, I really appreciate in-office events because I like nice spaces, and sometimes just being in that area makes me feel like I want to be here. I'm not familiar with a grad fuel event or sprint
That's very
week.
specific. Yeah, that's very specific, the grad fuel event. So that's an interesting one. Somebody's put in the chat about influencer activity is intriguing. I'm also unsure what that might be in a student engagement arena, but
I can give an example of that. So there's a particular law firm, I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name, but there was a YouTuber. She was a law student. She went to the University of Bristol, and I followed her all through her journey in university, and she ended up working with this particular company. And just because of her and because of that, I was like, I want to work with this company. because
Okay.
you know, she showed what life in that company was like. So that was interesting.
Maybe Ronke, you should mention the company just in case anybody's on from there, so they can tap you up for an opportunity.
It's a law firm. It's Linklaters, and the influencer was Eve Cornwall.
Interesting. Jensen, how about you? Are any of these unfamiliar to you but intriguing, or familiar to you and you've enjoyed them outside your normal sort of space of events?
I've not done a speed networking event either, but I definitely go to one. I'm not sure how good it would be, but I definitely give it a go. Not heard of a grad fuel event either. The mock assessment centres are really good. I really like them. And one that I don't see on there that I also really like is when we get guest lecturers in. They come into our lecture individually, give a talk. Those have been really good whenever that happens. Those have been, yeah, probably the most effective at relaying information and asking any questions.
No, that's brilliant. I think that's really interesting to know. And I mean, a straight up sort of 50-50 question, is your preference an opportunity to meet multiple employers at one event, or get to know one employer in more depth at a singular event?
Mine were definitely one employer at one event in depth. Like I said, the ones that I've had, the guest lectures, when they come in, it's one company, they talk you through the process, what you could end up doing, what opportunities they have there. Those have been the most informative to me, and ones I found the most interesting and engaged with the most.
And probably a final question in terms of, we spoke about the format of on campus versus off campus, and I think both yourself, Ronke, and Jensen, you both were firm believers in the on campus or face-to-face opportunities. What is it that turns your head and makes you interested in attending an event with somebody? What is the key hook for you in terms of what you either want to find out, or if you were in a careers fair space or some such, that they were doing something on their stand that really attracted your attention? Jensen, I don't know if you've got any thoughts on what is the thing that really turns your attention.
This might not be very useful to anyone, but for me, it's just if they've got like job titles that I've looked at and gone, that's something I really want to find out a bit more about. Or so, like, the more relevant or more like specific it is, the more, like, to me, the more I'm going to stand there and talk to whoever's there or engage with any lecture or whatever the event would be. That is what it is for me personally.
Ronke, how about you?
Similar, I'd agree with that, but it depends on whether it's a firm I'm familiar with, so a very big popular firm, or one I'm less familiar with. If I'm more familiar with this, I'm most likely just going to go there anyways because I'm excited to see them there. Like, hi, I want to work here. But if it's a firm that I'm less familiar with, I just kind of, I like to see merchandise, I'll be honest with you. I'd see the tote bag and think, let me see what they have to say. So I'll go for the tote bag, but leave with knowledge about opportunities that I can have.
You raised the one thing that I was trying to get to without actually mentioning, which is it is a real Marmite moment when we talk about giveaways at events. And I know we get a lot of feedback from universities and a desire, obviously, for people sharing giveaways to make sure that they are either eco-friendly or recyclable. We've gone are the days of the big brochures and things like that. That's, definite no. I have probably seen 400 different types of tote bags, and I'm sure the guys from each of the universities have seen even more over their time. But we did a session like this back in the early part of the year, and some desire around freebies. I think our student at that time said food is always the one that will get people's attention. I don't know if there's anything else beyond a good tote bag that grabs either of your attentions.
I really like a book with the firm branding on it. It makes me feel very happy.
I'm going to say food as well.
I'm beginning to feel that this is a male-female split because it was a male student that said the same last time as well. But I think it's I we always try to encourage our employers to have a look at eco-friendly goods that are either made from recycled products or can be recycled or reused. And I think the scope of that is changing substantially, but we do try to limit the numbers of what they're taking. But it is a real Marmite moment. Some people feel that we did get feedback that the more giveaways you have, the harder it makes it feel that you're trying to sell yourself, versus those that actually just really appreciate a good opportunity to pick something up for free. So thank you, as popped in the chat from Jessica. Thank you for the honesty in terms of the tote bag there, Ronke, and the food. Jensen's much appreciated. I've got one last mentee. If Jasmine, we can skip on to that, that'd be great. And then we can start talking about some of the key takeaways and answer some questions, I think, as we go. So just be really interested to hear from everyone if there is anything that you've heard from all of the panelists today that has changed your thoughts about what you might participate in going forward, something that you might try, something that you've enjoyed hearing about or intrigues you a little bit. Or whether it's more of the same. Is there anything that you would be considering as you start to look ahead to the new season? The reason we specifically wanted to do this event today was to do it whilst it was fresh in everybody's mind, but also make sure that people weren't putting everything down and waiting to plan until June next year, because I think it's important to plan ahead to get the key strategy in place that you want. So again, the mentee is on the screen. If you do want to participate, that'd be really, really helpful. And then, Jasmine, I don't know if you want to put out the questions, or do you want me to have a scan and see what I can fish out that we haven't actually mentioned?
If you'd like me to stay on the screen, then it might be easier for yourself to.
Okay, I can do that. That's absolutely fine. And thank you to Craig from HSBC, who has been chatting with the students in the chat and hopefully getting the answer to the questions. But Craig, is there anything in particular that you wanted to call out whilst we were in the Q&A session?
I don't know if you can hear me or not.
Yes,
if I'm
that's all
muted.
good.
Okay, perfect. No, just thank you very much for all of those that have come back on that. And sorry if I've been a little bit keyboard happy in the questions.
No, it's all good.
But really appreciate your honesty, guys. And quite insightful in terms of what you've offered. But yeah, particularly useful around the digital marketing aspect, because I do know we all like to say very similar things about our organisations, but going with an independent that offers impartial sort of feedback from the students or those on grad programs definitely resonates with us as well. So really appreciate your honesty on that.
Brilliant, thank you. And I will say as well that I can see that Mandy has got huge love in the chat here around her statements. I don't know, Mandy, if you want to talk about what you're doing in place of merchandise, just so that everybody can hear.
Yeah, of course. Hi. So I work for WTW. So we're not a hugely well-known brand in the market, I would say. But this year we took the decision to not do merchandise, just because linking it back to our sustainable kind of commitments as a business. So what we're doing is we're asking students, we've chosen 3 student-related charities, and we're asking students that come to talk to us to choose and vote for a charity. And then when we've finished our events, we will donate our merchandise budget to the charity that has the most votes. We're also doing the same for apprentices, but with a different set of charities.
I think you're getting a lot of love for that. That's and that's a really interesting idea. How do you tell people that's what you're doing? Because obviously you're in a if you're at a careers fair, there's lots of people with lots of goodies around you. How do you communicate that?
We've got quite a pack of volunteers who are all very well briefed, all very adept at attracting attention, because we have to, we could have all of the gimmicks and whatever we like on our stand, but it comes down to the fact that we're not terribly well known. So we rely on the people and our ambassadors that attend events to kind of engage with students as they hesitate and look at our stand and think, oh, do I know who they are? Do I know what they do? And then it's just kind of through the course of the conversation, and it's a QR code that's on the stand that people can scan.
Brilliant. And do you use, in terms of your big team of many, are you using grads and apprentices for the particular events that you're talking about?
We do, yes. So my team is small, very small. So we are very, very reliant on the business to support us. And actually, apart from questions about the recruitment process, grads and apprentices don't want to talk to our recruiters, with all due respect to them. They want to talk to the people who've lived their experience. So yeah, we always make sure we have representation, and we try and take as diverse a group, because we recruit into lots of different lines of business. So we try to take as diverse a group of lines of business students with us that we possibly can.
You'll be a career service nightmare when they have limitations on how many people you can have on stand and space, but I'm sure that they go out and filter amongst everyone. Then
we'll target the university for the appropriate courses and just send those lines
there
of
we go
business.
then. That's really great to hear. That's really, really interesting. And I can see on the screen here that some of the feedback in terms of the quick mentee mention is using grads as employer reps is something we've been a big fan of for some time. The skills gap is interesting. I think that aligns with the mock assessment centres. That's really quite interesting still. There seems to be still some a need to share a little bit more around the recruitment process. And I think both Jensen and Ronke have spoken about the opportunity to really get insights that they can't get elsewhere. So really talking to individuals about an organisation and their own experiences, which is fantastic. Food rather than merch is a very interesting one. I'm sure the health and safety challenges and the form method statements that you have to fill in for all of that will be fun for some organisers there as well. But I'm really pleased to see the depth of university partnerships. We do a lot of targeting in our universities. We don't exclude anybody because we do digital media for our employers, but we do recognise that with so many universities in the UK, it is important to build those relationships with universities that can bring you the best student engagement and the best way of working, in my experience as well, rather than simply just spraying your job opportunities out everywhere, really trying to get to people in the right place. So that's really, really very interesting. I think we can have a quick look at some key takeaways. I think we've covered most of the questions, but we will pull them out and just make sure that we do follow up afterwards as well, so that you've got some information, and just if we haven't dealt with any questions, we will cover that off. But I might have the chance of actually keeping you to time, so I'll try. In terms of key takeaways today, so application numbers are up. Renege rates are expected to increase without sufficient student engagement. So thinking about how you retain engagement as they come out of the recruitment process and your offers are made, how are you retaining interest in those students between now and obviously for most of us next September for our graduate intakes? What can you do in that keep warm opportunity? Students are looking for complete authenticity, insights into an organisation, but as much as anything else, an opportunity to perhaps network, build up their new skills, have a look at soft skills development as well as technical skills. And as Jensen mentioned, things like in lecture guest slots as well. More difficult to procure than it sounds, but I think working with those university partnerships and building up that relationship will give those opportunities too. Striking the balance in terms of event types to make sure that you're maximising your exposure to all the audiences that you're trying to reach and all the different groups, and have a look at how you are adjusting your expectations to suit. So you will not always have 400 people at every event. If you're running smaller events with smaller opportunities, but more targeted, diverse groups, what are your expectations? And one from me, which is particularly important, is have a look at how you can maximise your contact points with students, both pre and post events. So pre, to make sure that you have engaged them enough that they will come and visit you at a careers fair, that they will come and visit you at a skills session, and they do turn up. So trying to minimise that no-show rate, but tell them about they're going to experience and what they'll benefit from, but also staying in touch with them post-event and giving them a real candidate experience that retains their interest in you as a brand and hopefully you as an employer. But we know that there are more applications and more students than probably probably student schemes that are on offer. So really trying to maximise your connection with those students in a genuine way as possible will be key to making sure that you're seeing all the right students come through your doors in months and months to come. I think that is it for now. And any more questions, feel free to continue to put them in the chat. But I really, really would like to thank all of our guests today. So Emma Cooksley from Morrisons, thank you for your insight from an employer point of view. Jensen and Ronke from students, you've been really super helpful. And Ronke, thank you for managing the chat in terms of some feedback. That's much appreciated. Sorry, you've been having some issues, but you've both been very, very honest. It's been really helpful. And particularly, obviously, our university panels. Jessica from King's, Lucy from Leeds, and Victoria from Bath. That's really appreciated for your insights. I'm hoping we'll get more time with you in this format moving forward, because I think it's really very interesting to hear from you. And Hester, of course, again, last but not least, from Bright Network, sharing what it is that they are doing in terms of their membership events as well. But thank you all so very much for joining us. I hope that everybody's picked something up. We'll share the takeaways. And we're pretty much on time, so I consider that a big win for today. So thank you again. It's been lovely to see you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.